I believe humanity is at a crossroads, and we need to go beyond the known in order to successfully navigate unacceptable future. We have a toolkit that can contribute to our transformation as a collective consciousness. That toolkit includes love, wise effort, walking boots on the ground, doing good work, interbeing, and a symphony of synchronicities. The experience of my life supports trust in something larger than myself and gives rise to a set of beliefs that includes synchronicity and flow. I believe we live in a friendly universe that intrinsically provides subtle encouragement to engage with creation and flow. I believe that living with grace means that we open ourselves to having a subtle and discerning conversation with the wonder of life. And I believe that transpersonal forces can communicate in subtle and engaging ways. The psychologist Carl Jung coined the term synchronicity, which is a meaningful coincidence between events not connected by ordinary cause and effect. While events may not be connected on the surface, Jung states they are connected below the surface and for a reason that the unconscious and its archetypes are trying to communicate. One of Jung's favorite examples of synchronicity involved a rather intellectual client undergoing therapy with him. She was resisting therapy, rationalizing away the process. Then she reported having a dream in which she was wearing a scarab beetle necklace. The scarab beetle is a greenish beetle sacred to the ancient Egyptians. At the moment she was telling Jung the dream, he heard a knocking on the window. Intuition told him to get up and open the window, and in flew a beetle. The beetle landed on the table next to the client. It was a scarab beetle, just like in her dream. Jung spoke to her. "There is your dream." He reports that therapy progressed very well after the incident. Jung states that synchronicities will often occur at important moments in the process of growth. Jung labeled the collective unconscious and its somewhat independent archetypes as the source of synchronicity. The somewhat complex terminology initiated by Jung was his effort to sound more like a scientist than a mystic. But he knew he was talking about mystery, about transpersonal forces that can be experienced, but not fully understood. Carl Jung writes, "While the collective consciousness may be slow to integrate deep meaning, the individual may take heart in the law of synchronicity, which will function with or without their knowledge. As the old Chinese saying goes, the right man or woman sitting in their house and thinking the right thought will be heard 100 miles away." In other words, discovery and insight travel of their own accord and may communicate as intuition or synchronicity 100 miles away. 100 miles is a way of saying that wise thought travels outside of space and time. When we align ourselves with the good, and that's with a capital G, the good in the universe, that connection will travel with or without our knowledge. Synchronicity, grace, and intuition are avenues through which we can negotiate meaningful or wise experience, both individually and as connected groups. A synchronicity is a meaningful coincidence, such as a striking event or very unlikely happenstance. I find there is also a feeling that comes through with the event, either energetic or as something that creates its own space, and you pause. Synchronicities can promote growth, connection, and interconnection. We can't make them happen, but we can open ourselves to the flow of the universe. Being in flow is to be open to something larger than yourself, or to be in resonance with the right man or woman thinking the right thoughts 100 miles away. I'd like to share a personal example of a synchronicity involving meeting the right person at the right time. To be a meaningful coincidence, the chances of spontaneous encounter don't need to be nearly impossible. But in this case, they were. Everything is precisely true, except for my partner's name, which I changed. In August of 1993, after 15 years of marriage, Shelley decided to attend a week-long art class in Duluth. We had a dog who was at death's door. She requested I not make any decisions about our dog while she was gone. Since I did all the dog care, it occurred to me she really didn't understand the dog situation. So I asked if she was willing to take our dog with her, hoping it might get her past denial. She felt it was a good idea. It's worth noting that Shelley and I were having difficulty between us that were way past the denial stage. I could not deny that she was sliding into an obsessive, addictive mindset. Our spiritual and emotional intimacy was fading, and we'd begun to speak openly about getting a divorce. So our sweet little dog may also have become like an only child, a link between us. We both cared for him a great deal. So Shelley went to Duluth. As it happened, I'd also planned an August vacation. Shelley was already gone before I could finish arranging work details so I could go. I decided to go on retreat to the small geodesic dome near Lutsen, Minnesota, which is about 90 miles from Duluth on the North Shore. I felt it would be a good place to search the pathways between Shelley and I for the best possible outcome. This was before cell phones and internet. She knew nothing of my plans. On my way to Lutsen, I decided to stop at the Hardee's fast food restaurant in Two Harbors for a late lunch. It was about 2:30 p.m. Two Harbors is about 30 miles north of Duluth. Stopping at this particular Hardee's had become a tradition with Shelley and I. It was easy to feel nostalgic. Needless to say, when I saw Shelley walk into Hardee's within minutes of my arrival, I was more than surprised. It was almost inconceivable that it was happening, but it was happening, and therefore I knew it was a synchronicity. The room shifted in ways I can't explain. I knew that the universe was demonstrating a link between us that we should not ignore. When Shelley saw me, she was also surprised. She hadn't seen my car parked outside. After I let the wonder of the moment settle, I wanted to test the omen, see if there was a logical explanation for the encounter. Shelley told me that this was the first and only time she'd come to Hardee's on this trip. If she'd been coming regularly, this still would have been unusual, but I would have had doubt as to the meaning. I asked her why she decided to come on this day at this time. "I don't know," she replied. "I just suddenly felt I wanted to go to Hardee's for lunch." She never ate lunch at 2:30. So I said, but it's way past lunch. I know, she said, but my art class ran late and I was hungry. Then I had to ask, did you know I was coming? No, of course not. I had no idea you'd even be coming up here. Isn't this wild? Yes, it was wild. A true synchronicity. I was so glad to see her. I knew in that moment that the universe was getting us back together. I dropped any intent I may have been building for a divorce. We finished our meal. Then I followed her to her isolated campsite in Split Rock State Park. She had stayed there the 2 previous nights. She said that the first night there had been a very severe windstorm. Apparently, there were deaths within a 2-mile radius. The next night, Shelley told me that she was witness to a once-in-a-lifetime meteor shower. The power and the wonder had given her pause. I set her tent up to be more wind and weatherproof, and we said our goodbyes. I did not expect to see her until after our trip, which is why I was again surprised the next day when Shelley drove up to the dome with our dog. She said he was having a terrible time of it, that it was just too hot for him in Duluth. I told her it was also hot at the dome. I know, she said. I just can't bear to watch him suffer. You'll know what to do. She was right. I did know what to do, though that doesn't make it easy. The whole process was transformative and made an imprint on our lives. After burying our dog 4 feet under in a corner of our yard, I sang out my grief. When the grief settles, love is still shining. I would like to point out that the universe doesn't need to startle us with synchronicities and wonder to get our attention. There are times when ordinary reality comes alive for us, and grace or love seem to arrive of their own accord. But we might need to let go of distractions and open ourselves to mystery in order to become more available. When we become aware of that aspect of the universe that is always shining, it creates an impression, an imprint on the living. It just takes a sacred yes. Yes, I am open to the friendly flow of our universe. Sometimes we will see the results of grace in the world or find clarity or compassion that was hidden from us. Other times, we might not see the results of our communion. Please trust that, as the Chinese saying goes, the right man or woman sitting in their house and thinking the right thought will be heard 100 miles away. I have a true story that illustrates this quiet but shining synchronicity. This story is about the great poet Dante, who wrote the Divine Comedy, and is a story of how goodness can travel through the world with or without our knowledge. Dante was standing near the Ponte Vecchio, a bridge that crosses the Arno River in Florence. It was just before the year 1300. Dante saw Beatrice standing on the bridge. He was a young man, she even younger, and that vision contained the whole of eternity for him. Dante did not speak to her and saw her very little. And then Beatrice died, carried off by plague. Dante was stricken with the loss of his vision. She was the connection between his soul and heaven itself. She transmitted the energy of the muse, and from it, the Divine Comedy was born. In the Divine Comedy, Dante takes a journey through the Inferno and Purgatory. Then, Beatrice guides him through the spheres of paradise. 650 years later, during World War II, the Americans were chasing the German army up the Italian peninsula. The Germans were blowing up everything that would slow the progression of the American army, including the bridges across the Arno River. But no one wanted to blow up the Ponte Vecchio because Beatrice had stood on it and Dante had written about her. So the German commandant made radio contact with the Americans and, in plain language, said they would leave the Ponte Vecchio intact if the Americans would promise not to use it. The promise was held. The bridge was not blown up, and not one American soldier or piece of equipment went across it. We're often suspicious of mystery and sometimes require hard proof before we'll begin to trust in the unseen. This story seems like proof to me, the facts of which are not disputed. The right man was standing near the right woman, and both were heard 650 years later. The bridge was spared in a modern, ruthless war because Beatrice had stood upon it. I believe it is our work in this world to actively trust the inherent good in our universe. Of course, we still need discernment. Wishful thinking will not solve problems, but genuine hope can travel. When we go beyond the known, we truly do not know what is possible. We, quite simply, are never alone in the fields of love and divine creativity. Our synchronicities can urge us into inquiry and wise action. Synchronicities can function like a knock on the door from the flow of creation. Or, perhaps, they can hold a quiet whisper that bathes the world in the light of renewal. I'm going to end with a poem by Shalon Harkin. She uses the word God, so if you prefer, you can substitute source, the creation, or mystery. I feel God germinating the seed of my heart again. New life bursting out through me, breaking down all that I've known. That she, that's a capital S, that she may have more space to love the world through me. That she may have more space to love the world through me. Thank you for your kind attention.